gentlemen, or perhaps just ladies. Hi, Matt. Do we have some gentlemen in the crowd? Yes? Give him a round of applause. Oh, wow. That's a brave man. Very brave. Sanibonani. My name is Nompumelelo Mpumi Nobiva. And my story is that AIDS took my mother and not my spirit. It gives me great honor to stand before you here today to share my story, because I don't take for granted the fact that, it's a miracle to have an AIDS orphan from South Africa, where we have the highest prevalence compared to any other country in the world right now, sharing her truth to an international audience, one that's literally, the name is, I can't get over Nova Scotia. And so it brings me great joy to speak about my story, to speak about how I and every person in this room and every person in this world is never defined by our circumstances. We're always more than that. And my hope truly is that I can be a beacon of inspiration or hope or just possibility, that as you move on with your lives after this, you will think of me, you will think of the women who have graced this stage, and you will know that A, your challenges do not isolate you, you were never alone. B, everything that happens to you is actually happening for you. That's the big hypothesis of my life. It actually happens for you, right? And what I'm learning, I'm 25, so take this at a grain of salt, but also take it to the bank. What I'm truly learning is that we're here to manifest and bring forth our greatest selves and to give ourselves permission in the process. And we're here to use the tools that life gives us through our challenges, through our relationships, to advance ourselves. So I'm happy to share my life story, and I hope that you will keep those points as I take you through a journey. Kutiwa halala wabizwa. You were called upon. I was born in a corrugated iron shack in a township called Zonkizizwe. Townships are very popular where I come from. Townships were created as a place to concentrate black people in South Africa. The most renowned township is Southwestern Township. This is Soweto. This is where the late Mama Winnie Mandela's home was located. This is where the Mandela home was located. Townships were basically a place where everybody of my color belonged and was to stay there. The thing about townships is that they're plagued by poverty, as you'd imagine, lots of health issues, lots of socio-economic issues. And so when I speak, I like to say I was born in a world full of no's. I mean, you can get like, a no situation, and then you can get like a no to the exponential power. I was in the exponential region, where my mother was 17 years old when I was born. My father was 22. There wasn't much of a relationship. My family lived in a shack in this township. My grandmother had 9 children of her own. So when I was brought home as an infant, I was brought into abject poverty, which was a norm for my people who were stripped of their land and stripped of their economic strength to participate in the nation's growth and advancement. And so it's interesting for the same girl to now stand in front of this crowd. My mother brought me home to a family that shared and gave me a lot of love. While we lived in a lot of poverty, I was always surrounded by love. And I think people sometimes don't make those connections. And somebody asked me just a few weeks ago if I would ever change my life looking back. And I said, no. It had to be the way it was. I had to be born into that township for me to be who I am here today, so that no matter where I go internationally, I know my people. And I know that although I stand as one AIDS orphan, although I come as one AIDS orphan, I literally represent 3.7 million others who are on the stage with me today. Not only that, thank you. Not only that, but I represent millions of people living in abject poverty, so it had to be that way. But the first biggest, I'd say, bone-crushing trajectory of my life is when my young mother dies at the very tender age of 27. Before her death, I always knew her as this vivacious, beautiful, spunky, gorgeous woman. In fact, she was the first woman to wear her hair bald like I am, and I remember thinking, wow! I just couldn't wrap my head around it. You know, she was gorgeous. And my mom was this person who, although she had made a lot of mistakes, she brought a lot of light into our family and into our household. And so it was very uncomfortable for me as a child to witness how, because she had died of AIDS, suddenly we were meant to now forget about this individual, be very silenced about it, say cancer at best, but not AIDS. And so that bothered me because my mother's light is something that to this day I've never forgotten. In fact, when I was born and I was born into this township, we lived there for about 3 years. And you know, life wasn't easy. I was born just a year shy away from the first democratic elections in South Africa when Nelson Mandela assumed office. And this was in 1993. And so after we got the power and the freedom, what happened is a lot of conflict was now ensuing between our own political parties. And so this township, this little shack and this home, which was all we knew, was threatened because there was a lot of conflict. So we had to then flee, leave the township and move to the southern suburbs when I was about 3 years old. This is where my grandmother continues cleaning houses. She worked as a domestic worker. My grandfather fixing cars. My young mother sets off to Egoli, the city of gold, also known as Johannesburg. Jozi Maboneng. I don't know how many of you watched Black Panther. Yes? I'll tell you one thing. Wakanda is real. I am from Wakanda. Wakanda is real. And we have that vibranium. It's not blue and light technology like in the movies, but it is gold, it is copper, it is mineral, it is diamond, it is ivory, those all sorts of resources that, you know, are embedded in the belly of our continent. And so my mother goes to Wakanda and tries to make ends meet. Life is very tough in Jozi. The gold mines were really booming at the time, you know, early 90s. There was a lot of economic activity, but for a girl as young as she was, she didn't have, you know, a skill set. She barely completed her education. And so my mother tried many jobs when she got to town. She tried working as a hairstylist, she sold food, she worked as a hairdresser, many, many things. And I learned that near the end of her life, she went into prostitution. This is actually not a surprise, A. B, it is actually the easiest market for women and girls to get into. Of course, it's the hardest. It's the one where you're most exposed to crimes, but we won't even go into that. My professors got to hear about that in my essays about social justice. And so my mother contracts this virus, you know, through that. But in between all of that, my mother comes to visit me on weekends, and she's this beautiful person. She brings me the best clothes from town, and she'll braid my hair. I loved having my mother. And while my mother was in Johannesburg trying to make ends meet, my grandmother was, I guess, the CEO of my life. She was managing me. She was making sure that I was going to church, that I was fed every day. And so while I didn't have the ideal childhood, I certainly, in my eyes, had the best that I could have given the circumstances. And so my grandmother works hard. While I'm growing up to be about 9 years old, I'm watching this woman who will wake up every day at 5 in the morning to go make beautiful, clean houses, tend to something that she is denied in her own motherland because of her own skin color. Equally so, my grandfather fixing cars that he could never imagine to drive down our dusty streets of our beautiful African continent. And so I was raised in a family where I knew the value of hard work. Not only that, I also knew the value of not making excuses because I got to watch these women work. But of course, there came a time when my mother came home to visit, and unlike how she usually would visit and then leave, she stayed. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. It became very clear that something was wrong with Nonhlanhla. She had fallen ill. She was coughing in a way that was unrecognizable to us. Her skin was breaking out in a rash. And you know, when I speak about the AIDS epidemic, I like to bring forward the fact that it is a very different reality for people living in abject poverty than what a lot of people get to know internationally. What Magic Johnson is living is a whole different reality to what my mother and the millions who are wiped out and the millions who still live with the virus today have to go through. When my mother was dying, our home was no bigger than the kitchen of the apartment that I live in now. And so in situations of abject poverty, in fact, I'd argue in any case, but especially in abject poverty, it strips away your dignity. Before that stage, my mother does something beautiful. I'm about 8 or 9, I'm attending school. I'm the best English speaker in the family. When we first moved to the southern suburbs, Rosettenville, my grandmother put me in church. This is where I learned how to speak English. And I also think this is where I became a speaker, really. Because I would go to church and I would listen to all these stories. Noah and the ark, baby Jesus, the 3 kings and the stars. And I would just be blown away by these powerful stories. So after church, I would go straight home and I would stage these plays. And my poor grandmother, you know, on Sundays, you know, visitors come in all the time. She'd be the first person I perform for. And then, of course, anyone else who comes, we got to start all over so that they're going to get the full show. So I'm about 8 or 9 years old. My mother is home. She's become gravely ill. And somehow I'm very talkative about what's happening, even at school. Like, I'm talkative about the fact that my mom is sick. And she says, you know, I've heard that maybe there's no cure about this. And even more, nobody wants to talk openly about what it is. I feel like I'm not supposed to talk about this. I was that talkative in an African family about AIDS. I was also the same individual who, when I wore good shoes or a good dress to school and people said, oh, I love your dress, I would say, thank you so much, we got it from Goodwill. That would feel good to say. I would say, thank you so much, these shoes came from the Salvation Army. See, when we're children, we levitate with so much possibility. When we're children, we haven't inherited all these ideas of how we're supposed to appear and be perfect and not show vulnerability or insecurity. And it was important for me to be that person because you will see later on in my life, it is the reason I am found for the moment that would change my life. So one day I come home from school and my mother is sitting on the bed. She says, Mdanam is up. And Xhosa means my child, come here. She says, sit down, we have to talk. I know I was about 8 years old because when she died, I was 9. She said, Umama uzotshona. I'm HIV positive and I'm going to die. I didn't know what AIDS was, but I knew what death was because just a year before she had been pregnant. And my little brother, Usamkelo, whom we'd been so excited to have a baby in the house, didn't make it. And so while my mother is talking to me, I'm about 8, I don't know what to say, but I think she can tell and she can see all the confusion and frustration just building up because all I heard was, Dizochona. And I remembered when Samkelo died, they said, Ushonile. So my mother reached out to me and said, Mdanam, you must go on because you will be different. Qhubeka esontweni. Carry on working hard in school, Bumi. Do the things I could never do. Carry on going to church. Carry on being good to your grandmother. Promise me that you will do that. Promise that you will never stop working hard in school. Promise that you will be good to your ugogo, your grandmother. And promise that you will never stop believing in God. And it was such an awkward, scary conversation for me that it was a secret of mine for a whole year because my mom, after that conversation, was then sick for 1 year, 6 months. She went from HIV, obviously, to AIDS. ARVs in the country were scarce at the time, early 2000. We had President Thabo Mbeki debating where our funds should go, and AIDS just wasn't the popular choice. In fact, a lot of our people were told by our health minister that they should eat more beetroot or drink more water. Beetroot in abject poverty is a luxury, my love. Despite the fact that a beetroot has nothing to do with it. And so my mother becomes the person I watch as she dies. She goes from Baragwana Hospital, she goes from hospices. In fact, there was a time when I was still 8 or 9 with my grandmother, who was 52 or 53 at the time. We're trying to read a prospectus to understand exactly what this virus is and what we can do to help keep uNonhlanhla alive. And so whatever it is that told this woman that she should share her story with me, her 9-year-old daughter, is a major part of why I believe I'm standing here in front of you today. There is power in sharing stories. My 25-year-old mother recognized my humanity in a way that many people have not yet found the strength to. She was, I mean, you've got to be an element of crazy. It's got to be some special stuff. To be 25 and sit with an 8-year-old and come to terms with what's what. Imagine if that was the world we lived in. If we came forward in all of our truth, wholeheartedly, and said, this is who I am in my truth. And so my mother sharing her truth was one of the first things that I believe was the saving grace. That was a big no from a distance, but I can tell you that that was a good trajectory for me to then see that if actually I don't go to school, if I'm not good to my grandmother, if I stop attending church, meaning if I make sure that I stay off the streets, if I don't do those things, then yes, chances are very high that in my neighborhood, I will contract the virus. I will become a prostitute. I will take drugs, because these are the things, this is norm where I'm coming from. And so the things that happen to you do not happen to you, they happen for you. In the thick of it, of course, it's hard to see. Would I have it on any other way? I don't think so. Truly not. While I lost my mother, a hero stepped forward. My grandmother, who had been taking care of me from when I was a child, stepped in at 53. I was working on an application for the Obama Foundation, and their question was, where have you seen ethical leadership? I said, my grandmother. That's exactly where ethical leadership is. We're taught to seek heroes outside of ourselves, outside of our households, on TV screens. And then, of course, they're packaged. There's these superhuman people that are sometimes very hard to relate to. But my hero is my grandmother, who at 53, I am not 53 by any chance, but look, I know that if you're 53, it is not an exciting idea to pick up a 9-year-old and start all over, especially once you've had 9 goes of that process. And my grandmother stepped forward wholeheartedly, despite the fact that she had lost a child. My grandmother made sure that even while my mother was ill, I showed up at school. When I graduated primary school, I had full attendance. And so, even though I've had incredible life experiences, yes, I've spoken at the White House, I've met Maya Angelou, I've met Oprah Winfrey, I've met Michelle Obama. I think about 5 weeks ago, I was in the same room as Beyonce, Jay-Z, Blue Ivy, Tina. I find that really funny, you know? I was like, wait, is this still me? But I share that because, yes, I've met inspiring women who have done great in moving this world forward and contributing to our lives and consciousness, and I love them and I praise them. But the hero who still reigns supreme in my life is my grandmother. Because what it takes to do what she did is something that still blows my mind. And so my grandmother makes sure I'm still in school. In fact, when I'm in the first grade, well, before I went into the first grade, I was about 6. My grandmother was trying to get me into school, and the school system starts from the 7th grade. I mean, from when you're 7 years old, not 6 years old, to get in the first grade. And my grandmother was like, she just couldn't understand. She took me there when I was almost 6, and then took me back when I was 6, but 6 I have a stronger memory of. And she's like, you need to accept this child into your school. And they're like, no, ma'am, you don't understand. She needs to be 7 years old to enroll. My grandmother's like, you're wasting time. This child is clever. She's clever. And so this is the woman who raises me. This is the woman who, while she's cleaning houses that she only dreams she could have, which, spoiler alert, she may have by the end of this year or early next year, my grandmother will walk into her home. This woman would wake up every day and go work. And she showed me the value of hard work, and she wouldn't complain despite all the things that have gone wrong and all the no's stacked up in her world. My grandmother just kept pounding the mold, kept working hard. And that's what taught me to work hard. And I'll never forget when I was about 13. I've now been in school, obviously, and it's time for me to go to high school. My grandmother says, my child, where are you going to go next? You know, where are you going to go? I had 3 options. There was Forest Hill, the Hill High, and Mondial High, I think. Forest Hill, a boy had just been stabbed to death that week. I'd seen it on the news. I said I was not going there, which left me with 2 options. The 2 options were so far from where we lived. There are lots of parks, and maybe sometimes even like deserted areas that are infamous, I mean known for women getting raped, women getting kidnapped, women and girls. So when I was trying to figure out where to go to high school, it wasn't about who has the greatest sports team, who has the greatest co-curricular, who has the cutest boys for prom. No. Where do I go where I'm the least likely to get raped on my way to or from school? Where do I go where I'm the least likely to get kidnapped? This is a reality. And the reason that you don't hear so much of these stories is because my people are still oppressed in the trenches, you see. My people are not the people who get the most airtime on the media or get the biggest headlines on what's happening. Just last year, in May, we lost over 60 women and girls to intimate partner violence, killed in just the space of 30 days. And of course, that wasn't reflected anywhere on national media because my people are still in the trenches. And so my grandmother, as we're talking, she's like, you know, I wish we could find a boarding school for you, you know? Because I'm sure at this point she knew the boys were starting to notice me. I was 13. And she said, you know, boarding school's perfect because it's like a container. I remember thinking, okay, container. So I went to school. We never got to finish that conversation. It was unclear as to where it is I would go next. And it just so happens that around June that year of my last year in primary school, we're writing exams in a big room like this. And, you know, I'm just doing my thing. And something in me says, look up, Nompumelelo, look up. And I look up to see Ms. Dikobe, Ms. Nzele, standing in front of the hall, writing down names. And Ms. Dikobe is just going through the hall like this. And Ms. Nzele is writing the names. And I'm like, what's going on? And then Ms. Dikobe goes and she points at this girl and she points at that girl. She points at that girl and then she points at me. I'm like, whoa. I've always been a chatterbox. So 50-50, you know, I could have done something. So I thought, let me just get back to my work. And I got back to my work and I carried on. And at the end, they called a long list of names. I think about 35, maybe 40 names. And they said, girls, stay behind. We have an announcement to make. They say, Oprah Winfrey is coming to South Africa to build a school. And we think you should apply. I thought, who? I'm being honest. I didn't know who Oprah Winfrey was or the magnitude of her work. I knew her as the woman from TV. There were 3 channels at home, SABC 1, SABC 2, SABC 3. Ah, it's Oprah, you know? That's all I knew. And I thought, wait, the woman from SABC 3. They say, yes, the woman from SABC 3 is coming to build a school, a boarding school for girls. When I heard boarding school, I just thought container, container. Container. They had me a container. And then I heard something like, for girls like you, girls who had grown up in disadvantaged circumstances, but have great merit scholarship. And I thought, this is my chance. They gave me that big brown envelope. I ran home to go show my grandmother. And I said, go, there. The woman from TV, she's coming here to build a school. It's the container you spoke about. Yes. And I said I was going to apply. My grandmother said, Enzanjalo. It's a beautiful, strong Hlubi, which is a mix of Xhosa, Nguni, a bit of Zulu, Tswana woman. She's got it all. And she says, Enzanjalo mntanam, apply. In fact, when those applications were put in my hand, my family and I were living in a garage. When I say I ran home, I ran to a garage that was a little spot where it was my grandmother and grandfather's bed, a wardrobe. It was our couch by day, my bed by night, very clear on that. Little TV set, little stove to cook, little cabinet for the kitchen, a door, a drain, out. We were so poor that we couldn't afford a room inside the house. So sometimes poor families will rent a room inside one house. So you'll have a house that has maybe about 5 families living in it. We were poor that we couldn't afford inside, so we lived in the garage. And my grandmother, while I was working through these applications one day and I was stuck on a question, she says, you know, good thing we live with all these people, because now you can go inside and ask them, see if somebody can help you with this question. And if nobody can help you, don't worry about it. Come back to me. I'm going to send you with one of your uncles. You guys will go down this entire street until you figure out how to answer that question. That is the woman who raised me. There is much to celebrate in that. Thank you. And so I went through these application forms, and I was encouraged by my grandmother, and I just knew I wanted to get into the school. So I went and I submitted my forms, and I think about maybe about 4 weeks, I found out that I'd made it. I'd qualified to the first round, and I was the only one who had qualified. And I thought, okay. And our first assignment was to draw a dream house and write about our dreams for the future. Did I write? Oh, I wrote. Not only that, I drew my dream house, which had 2 of everything. 2 houses, 2 swimming pools, 2 doors, 2 of everything. And I would literally, one for me, one for my grandmother, one for me, one for my grandmother. So this qualifies me to the second round, but I really think it's because people were curious. This is a child, drawing 2 of everything. So I found out I'm the first to make it out of Rosettenville Central, the first to make it out of Johannesburg South, the first to make it out of Region 9. Oh, I'm starting to feel good about this. Okay. And then I find out that there are over 6,000 applicants from all over South Africa who are applying for this position, where less than 200 would be accepted. Very competitive, yes. It's cool to think you're one of the smartest people in your school. It becomes a little interesting when there are 6,000 of you who think that the same way, and you're teenage girls. And so we work hard, and it was testing. There were tough times where, it was aptitude tests, it was science tests, it was English tests. I'll never forget this one time they had us in these camps where we were sitting in circles, and the questions were, what are you going to do about social inequality? What are you going to do about patriarchy and its role that it plays on the continent when it comes to oppressing our women? What are you going to do about the 8 socioeconomic issues that we have in this continent? What will you? And all these questions, we have big cameras in our face. We have a group leader who's noting things down on how we're responding, how we're reacting to things. And I remember feeling like, whoa, this is such a big challenge. And I like to share this because a lot of us sometimes think that when our moment comes, the clouds part. These trumpets. And this knight on a silver white horse comes over and knights us. Oh, you have now made it. No. Usually, when we're breaking through, when we're breaking new ground, there is discomfort. There's pain. It's uncomfortable. And I learned that that was okay. That always okay to be in a situation where you're being tested for your resolve in a space where other people are shining their lights, because that's the reality of life. Not only should we want ourselves to succeed, but we should want that for the women sitting next to us. There is that much space, there is that much good in the world, there is that much gifts and goodwill. And you know, I learned this sitting in a room with thousands of girls from townships. I'm talking from Kwakwa to Umlazi to Wamashu to Alexandria to everywhere. Chills. It's like, oh my God, how do we get this? And so we just kept working hard, and I made it through the second last round. And there was one where, I think it was science. I've never been a science girl. I think it was science. And my grandmother said something so real, because I was so discouraged. She said, "Mntanam, ungazilibali ukuba ungubani." Do not forget who you are. It's very convenient in the face of adversity and challenges to start forgetting who we are. What I've learned in life is whenever you declare, you're going to walk out of here with a lot of new declarations. I'm empowered, I'm a woman, I'm fearless, victory pose, chakras. Yeah? You're going to be doing all of that. And it's going to be a great energy, right? You feel it now. You're going to walk away. In fact, I'm sure some of you are trying to figure out, how do I keep this? How do I keep this motivation going further than this weekend? The truth of it is, once you convict to a better you, a better, greater you, everything that's the opposite of that will come charging towards you. It'll show up in your relationships. You know, I see it with guys I date, you know. Or it shows up in your friends, or it shows up in your jobs and all these things. And you have to remember when these things happen, that these things don't happen to discredit you. They don't happen to belittle you. They don't happen to eliminate you. You're far greater than that. These things show up so that you can validate what you already know is true about who you are. That's what my grandmother meant when she said, "Sukungazilibali ukuba ungubani na." Do not forget who you are. And so I work hard and I qualify to the last round, and they say, "Girls, thank you for making it this far. Unfortunately, there's one more exam. No, you cannot study for it. Just go home and pray. We'll call you back." We'll call you back. And I remember thinking, oh boy, you know when you've wanted something really bad, and then something like that happens, and you're like, oh, they're gonna figure it out. Maybe I'm not the smartest person here. In the last round, we were called to this camp, and I remember sitting in this room, and from where I could see, you know, I was wearing my best school uniform, the greenest one. I had 2 uniforms. The one that is washed out is my everyday one, and then the one that is a strong green is the one that I only wear on special occasions. So I sat in this room in my bright green dry mac and gray school pants, and I'm sitting in a room with other scholars. There's a big brown mahogany door right ahead of me. From where I'm sitting, I can see girls who would come out of this room, and I cannot describe to you what was going on in that room. These girls were hysterical. I mean, they would walk out jumping in the air, screaming, tears. I'm sitting there like, what kind of exam is this? You know? And I'm waiting for my turn. My surname is Nobiva, so N always at the tail end of any situation. Any. So I'm waiting and I'm waiting and I'm waiting and I'm waiting, and eventually my time comes. Nompumelelo, you're up. Get up, deep breath, walk towards the brown mahogany door. I open it. This is so Oprah Winfrey, spoiler alert. There are these big gold fluorescent lights, this big camera, this lady who I learned was the best friend, and you know, the chief of staff, and you know, several people in the room, and the woman from TV. And she stood up. She said, "Hi, Mpumi, welcome. Welcome, welcome, congratulations." And she's walking up to me. She says, "Hi, I'm Oprah." "Hi." "Hi, Oprah. I'm Mpumi." She says, "Oh, come here. You've done so well. Congratulations for making it this far." She gives me the warmest hug. And she says, "Sit down, let's talk." I'm kind of glad I didn't know who Oprah Winfrey was, because that moment could have meant something different. So I sat down and spoke to Oprah. I was 13 years old, and she asked me about what I had overcome, what I had seen in life, where my biggest heartbreaks have come from. What do I see in my country? What do I want to change? And it's as though, you know, I could see all the flashbacks of women being abused in these rooms we'd live in, you know, and nobody would say anything, or flashbacks of, you know, children going missing, or, you know, a lot of abuse happening in our societies, and just so many things that bothered me. We were almost homeless at some point, and this is nothing unusual or even surprising for people of my color in our own motherland. So I kept speaking and speaking and speaking, and at the end she said, okay, I hear you. She said, you know, what are the toughest things you have been through? And I said, losing my mother, especially to AIDS, because it felt like I wasn't supposed to be myself in mourning her. It felt like I was just supposed to forget her, even in my own family, behind our own closed doors, and that bothered me. Because I'm quite a chatterbox, and sometimes I just want to talk about things the way they are, you know? So we speak, and then eventually she asked me one last question. She says, okay, so tell me, why should you get an opportunity to be in my school? This would be the defining moment of my life. Again, not the classic Clouds Parton moment. It's as though everything I had seen, the frustrations I had felt about the fact that every president in our country is a man. I mean, I love Nelson Mandela, but that's a man. And Winnie Mandela, God rest her soul, is the reason that the world knew about Nelson. And he stayed alive. That's the truth. That woman was writing letters to the international community so that the apartheid government would be sanctioned and stopped to a halt because of that woman. So many women have critical roles in keeping this world going, and yet they're invisible. That bothered me. I didn't obviously articulate it in such a great way, but it was to that point. The finance minister is a man. His face, Mandela's face, is on our money. The minister's signature is on our money. Everything is controlled. It feels like I'm a mistake, or I'm not supposed to be who I am because I'm born here and I'm who I am and I have the skin color that I have. And so we speak, and I say, ma'am, I guess what I'm really trying to say is I have nowhere else to go. For me, this is it. But I can promise you that if you let me into your school, that I will do everything in my power to make you proud. I find out that I'm one of the girls to be accepted into the container. And I make it into the first class of the Oprah Winfrey Leadership Academy for Girls, and my life is changed forever. For one, thank you. My grandmother doesn't have to worry about what's Mpumi gonna eat, where is she sleeping. You know, I walked into that school and I was called a leader from the get-go, leader. And I worked hard. I did everything I could to just constantly move my life forward. And you know, the Oprah School is such a great leadership incubator, but it's also such a great place to unpack. That's where I learned I had so many things inside of me that I needed to heal through, things that I needed to let go of. And I found meaning, because now I was able to study what was happening in our communities and what happened to my mom. And I learned for the first time that, oh, so I'm not alone. At the time, I think there were 1.2 million. Today, as I stand, there are 3.7 million AIDS orphans. I'm not alone. And my mother is not alone. Yes, the AIDS epidemic is skyrocketing in sub-Saharan Africa, because I was just at the UN and I learned that we're processing over 7,000 records of new infections on a weekly basis. Can you imagine? Over 7 million people. And we're what, a nation of 55 million? It's more than 10% of our people. And you can bet on the fact that it's people living in extreme poverty who are facing the harshness of this virus more than anything. And so the things that happen to you don't happen to you, but they happen for you. Bishop T.D. Jakes says something so profound. He said, it is the pain of being you that is the power of being you. Yeah. It is the pain of being who you are and the things you have to survive, the things you have to go through, that becomes the power of who you are. Because no matter where I am in the world, I will always have a place to stand. Because I have a story. And not just me. A lot of people, I've had people say to me, oh, Mpumi, I'm so sad. I don't have a story. I've never seen sadness. I say, no, you don't understand. Unless you literally just fell from the sky right now. You have a story. You have a story. Mine has to do with AIDS. Yours doesn't have to be anywhere near that. If you've not seen difficulty, I know that as a person you've had to overcome challenges. What does that mean? What does that take? And the reason that you've made it now means that you're on the other side where now you can begin pulling others up with you. This is the meaning of life, you see. This is the point. This is the point. And so your adversity, your challenges, your insecurity, your low self-esteem, all those things I still go through. I just put up a post today about self-image and how that's been a tough thing. I have a big scar because I was hit by a car when I was 6. Yeah, talk about a tough life, man. Yeah, I was 6. I was hit by a car. And, you know, your body in the African family is a big thing. And I remember being told as a child, because we're so poor that there's no bathroom or whatever, so when you bath here. You know, once you're old enough, you can start asking people to leave. But before that, you can just bath while we're doing our thing. And someone said to me, Mpumi, I don't know if you'll ever find marriage, that scar on you. And for a long time, I'd never been able to let go of that. I can feel myself getting emotional about it right now. Today, I just put up my first post, not in an entire bikini, but close. Being a bikini, you know? All those things that we go through are not there to break us down. If we can center, if we can go to a place that these women have spoken about, then we can always summon our power, because that happens for you. Now I get to travel the world, be on these private jets, all because I'm a girl who understands the power of her story and understands that I went through that so that I can now be a beacon of hope, and I can be a voice for the millions who cannot be here today. And so every person sitting in this room has overcome something. I don't even care if it's a tough recipe. Look, if you figured something out, if you have figured something out, share it. Share your story, share your lessons, share it. It feels so good to give to others. It feels so good for them to give to you. A lot of people will say, Mpumi, you were so great. Thank you so much for coming to speak to us. You don't understand. You give to me as well. This is a beautiful exchange. And you can do that too. You can do, look at what Charlotte did. She was in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. Look at what she's manifested. And so what we're talking about here today is what Oprah Winfrey spoke to me about. Years later, I graduated among the top of my class at the academy. And I actually sit on the board of directors, which is quite an exciting thing, I must say. I like it. Thank you. I worked hard, graduated among the top of my class, secured a full ride scholarship to the United States, and this is where my life began. Here in America in 2012, I graduated at the top of that class. I wasn't always a perfect straight-A student, and I like saying that because it is only when it clicked for me that, oh, so this life is a projection of what I put into it. So if I put certain amount of hours into my schoolwork, I'm gonna get a certain amount of grade on it. If I work hard, if I dedicate myself, this is what I later learned as a growth mindset when I was doing my master's thesis, growth mindset versus fixed mindset. But, you know, so I work hard, I graduate at the top of that class, I secure a full ride scholarship to continue my master's, and in between, we're sometimes lucky enough to, you know, be in the presence of either Miss Winfrey or some of these powerful people who continue to expand our view on what a leader is. And what I've learned is what a leader is, and even what a celebrity is, are people just like you and I who have given themselves permission. There are people who have said, yes, I will be seen, because greatness requires visibility. There was a point in my life where I thought they were made of different stuff. So this is a big breakthrough. I was sitting at Oprah Winfrey's table. She was recounting all these amazing experiences she's had. Girl from Mississippi, rising, doing what she's done, changing my life. And I'm sitting at the edge of my seat in California, and I'm levitating. I just want to do it too. I'm sitting there like, how do I do this, you know? I mean, look, the billion too, that could work, you know? I'm thinking about all these things that Miss Winfrey has done, and I'm just sitting there like, how do I do this? How do I do this? And as she's talking, I can see myself doing some of those things, and I have no idea on where to start. So eventually, after she's done talking, I say, you know, ma'am, I'm curious, like, where do I go? You know, how do I do this? What are the steps to doing this. And I'll never forget what Oprah Winfrey said to me. I'd even argue that after meditation, this, what I'm about to tell you, is the greatest gift after my education. She said, honey, don't you see? Don't you see that everything you have ever dreamt, everything you have ever imagined for yourself, don't you see that you already are? You already are everything you see deep inside of you. Your job is to give it permission. Give it permission. And it won't be easy. These are my words now. Oprah ended at, because these are good. It won't be easy. It won't always be neat and tidy. Biggest lesson for me when I get these great ideas, because after I left Oprah's table, I never looked back. That's when I really started moving. And I would see fear, and I would see insecurity, and I would just, let's go. And what I started learning is sometimes I would have these great ideas. I would have these great ideas, and I'd ask my best friend who loves me, and I love her. She would go, you know, I just don't see it. Is that what you want to do? And I'd say, yes, but I'm trying to explain it. And after like 4 or 5 times of these encounters, there comes a point where I decided, I'm just going to do this anyways, because it won't go away. This sharing story thing just, it won't go away. So I finally do it. I do this first really humble, sort of crappy campaign, but it's great. It's passionate. And she's one of the first people to run up to me, and she says, wow, how did you do this? This is amazing. And I thought, how? I've been talking about this. And she says, oh, I didn't realize. This is great. And it aligns so well. And I said, oh, I see. So my job is not to get what is inside of me validated by those around me. That's not what I'm here to do. My job is to receive, be it from God, be it from source, be it from whatever it is that you believe is the reason you're sitting here today. When you receive, your job is to pull it through. Your job is to move forward in faithful courage. Your job is to move despite the fact that you can't see it, despite the fact that you can't visibly or fully articulate what you're trying to say. Your job is to move by faith and not by sight. That's your job. And I think God made it that way so that I would never lose sight of who God was. Because imagine if my friend was the person who validates what I do. You see? So when you leave here, you will continue to be inspired. You will continue to be opened up and want to move the world and do great things. And the very first thing you want to see is other people. What are other people doing that's similar? No, that's not your job. That's actually a disservice to the beautiful, magnificent, powerful creation. I mean, the fact that you're a woman, this is a good time to be a woman. Me too, all sorts of things are happening for us, okay? Give those women a round of applause. It's a good time to be a woman. And I know it's hard, but it's a good time to be a minority. For the first time ever, we have devices that can immediately expose us to millions of people around the world. And so now is a time where you must give yourself permission to be all that you are. Imagine sitting in a township. I couldn't even, there was a moment when I came into Toronto and I'm trying to explain to my grandmother what Toronto is on the phone. Like, go, big buildings here. My life is quantum leaps away from where I first started. When I learned I could speak, there was obviously insecurity, but I just went and did it anyways. Because that's where greatness begins. You must give yourself that permission, you see. Give it. When you're sitting on the plane and the pilot is taking off, you know, there are great chances when he's slanted this way that all you see is the sky. And if I argued to someone that there was a whole island at the bottom, somebody could discredit me and say there's no such thing. All I see is the sky. Once that plane levels and shows us the island, you see that it's a different story. You must move by faith and not by sight. That island is there, your purpose is there, your dream, everything is already valid. You just need to give yourself permission. Somebody asked me, they said, Mpumi, in closing, What would you do if your mother were to appear here today? What would you say to her? I think I would say, Mama, look at where I stand now. And you had a lot to do with that. You see, contrary to popular belief, I'm honored to be your child. I am proud to be Nonhlanhla Nobiva's child. Nonhlanhla, who died and was buried because of HIV, died of AIDS in 2002, June 6. I'm proud to be that woman's child. And I would say to her, you did that. You were crazy enough to speak to me. I know for a fact that no other African people were doing that. I don't want to spread stereotypes about my people because we're great people. But maybe within that radius of where we were, I don't think there were any 25-year-olds. Millions were wiped out of my mother's generation. And yet she recognized my humanity. Maybe to her it might have been an instinct or a feeling or intuition, and she followed it. Look at what happens when you take a chance on intuition. And so I would say, look at where I stand now. Now I'm leading a movement, an exciting one, uniting girls against domestic violence and AIDS. When it first happened in South Africa, where we lost 60 women and girls, I was bothered. It bothered me that Karabo Mokoena, who was 21, killed by her boyfriend, stabbed to death and then burned. And then when her body wouldn't burn, he then went and dumped her at a dump site, which started then a trend, collection of bodies that would be discovered in townships and rural areas. What bothered me in my country just last year is the fact that at best, of course, the news will talk to you, people will send their condolences. If you're lucky, you'll trend on Twitter for a few weeks and then gone. The president of our country at the time, he was on a rape trial when he was elected into power, so it's no surprise to me that 60 girls, youngest being about 6 months old, I'm talking gruesome crimes. And of course, this just goes unnoticed. So I came to the United States, I started this movement, I didn't know what I was doing. It was just intuition, and I figured out how much it cost to pull together a little event, and we found that it would be about $60,000 to do an event at Constitutional Hill, bring the youth. And I was going online, I was screenshotting everything of these articles, and I didn't know what to do, and I was trying to fundraise to show the world about what's happening in my country. And my uncle said, slow down. You're talking about fundraising, real people have died. Be careful, because you want to do this online, you haven't figured things out. Just take your time. I have no time to take. So I immediately thought, who do I know who's in media and deals with tough topics? So I reach out to Ms. Winfrey's office, and takes a while to get a response back, but of course, she responds in a way that blows my mind. She says, you know, I'm so proud of you, because what I was saying to her is, I don't know what to do. I don't have this figured out, but here's what I'm trying to do, because what I'm seeing is an injustice. You see, it's wrong for women to die at this rate, for young girls, for majority of them to be coming from poverty, which means people really just don't care about us. So you taught me to be a leader. What do I do with this? Here's what I'm trying to do. Is this okay? Will I get sued? What's gonna happen? So she said, I'm so proud of you that I will not only match that $16,000 you're trying to fundraise, but I will match everything you fundraise up to $100,000. Which blows my mind. Like, what? $100,000 this time last year, matched by Oprah Winfrey, that would be $200,000, which translates to about 2.7 million rand of money, just extra money that, guess what, an AIDS orphan is bringing forward to help others who are trying to survive circumstances. So the things that happen to you don't happen to you, they happen for you. Now this child who was born in a world full of no's, in a shack with all sorts of stuff stacked against her, Steve Jobs said, if you want to know where you're going, look back. Look back at your life, connect those dots. It makes sense to me why we had to move from the townships, why we went to the domestic houses, why it clearly makes sense so that I now can help those who are going through those circumstances. It makes sense why I'm a chatterbox and won't shut up, because I actually like this, you know? I like talking about tough things, I really do. Now the same child is raising awareness. You know, we've built a strong program that trains boys and girls. I was biased at first, I just wanted to work with women and girls, and then I realized that's not sustainable for any society. So we give them skills training, leadership development, storytelling, and it's amazing. I look at these images and I can't believe that this is at the labor of one child, one out of millions. So imagine if we could inspire every child to see the possibility. Imagine if we could inspire every person to see their possibility, because impossible does not exist, right? We can agree on that. It means you're possible for as long as you give yourself the permission, you see. You've got to give yourself permission. When I started this campaign, I didn't see the whole picture. I didn't know. What you want to get rid of right now is the idea that you have to know. If you knew everything, then why would you be here right now? You're on earth to discover. You're here to enjoy the contrast that this world has to offer. So when you feel challenged, do not be the first self-sabotage. Do not be the first person to disqualify. Give yourself permission. Then I went and started something else. It's a weekly program. So if any of you want to keep up with my work, it's on mpuminoviva.live. Every week. This month has been a tough one of April. Our intention as a collective of women and girls and boys, and men actually, which is really cool, is to strip from the old self, stripping from old toxic thoughts, stripping from negative toxic behaviors, stripping from the idea of who you're supposed to be and stepping into who you really are, giving yourself that permission. That's what this is about. I don't know where it's gonna go, but I do know that in 24 hours we had over 16,000 views, and I couldn't imagine how. And it's a powerful thing. So if you ever feel like you need a community or just people to relate to, I shared The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, a great book to teach you about how you are not your thoughts, how you can disassociate from centuries and generations of patterned thoughts that teach you to groom and carry yourself in a certain way that has nothing to do with who you are or what you're here to do. Power of Now, check that out. This child, in closing, is a beautiful girl who is in our program. She's not sitting there thinking about the fact that maybe she doesn't have a father or maybe she was raped. These are cases of the students we work with. You know, she's in the now. That's what Eckhart Tolle speaks about. He speaks about the power of now. There's no point in lamenting over the past. We all know that that's happened. Get over it, accept it, forgive life. There's no great gift from always imagining the future, because guess what? That's not promised. The power of now is where we truly create. W.H. Murray speaks about commitment. This quote changed my life. It's a longer quote, but at the beginning he says there's one elementary truth about human beings, is that until we commit, there's always a chance to draw back, a chance to hesitate, a chance to, oh, I'm not sure. But he says when you do commit, then providence moves too. All sorts of unforeseen favors, support will rise up to meet you. When I first started speaking, I spoke churches, clinics. I would write to clinics and say, can I please speak to your women who are infected with the virus? And of course they'd say no, but I still did it. My point is, give yourself permission. These things will take time. Start where you are. Start with what you've got. Keep moving. Focus on the end goal. You know, he says it so profoundly. He says, whatever you can do or dream you can do, begin it. Boldness has magic, power, what is it? Genius, magic, power, and whatever. All those good things, they're in there. And I know this is true because there were times when I was Googling what international speakers were, and I'd see all these people, and I'd think, me? Is that what I've been doing? Imagine had I stopped because I didn't have the right shoes, or because I wasn't as groomed as some of the speakers who are on the bureaus. Imagine had I stopped. Now I stand on stages wearing shoes that I sometimes can't even pronounce the designers because providence has moved. Sometimes I receive a box in the mail and it says, here are some shoes for your next talk. Providence will move in your favor. In as much as it is not your job to seek that validation, it is also not your job to try and figure out where everything is going to come from, when it will arrive, and how it will be packaged. That's not the best way to approach your humanity. Your humanity is simply to receive, apply, and take it from me. Everything you need will show up. It will show up in your favor, and you will know exactly what to do with it. This is how greatness happens. This is how the first of whatever happens. This is how I have happened. I'm standing here before you today, and I don't doubt the fact that I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. Wildest.